All right, everybody. Welcome to the first ever episode of Lion's Life. I'm joined by Mark Shives. I'm sure you guys are looking at your screen wherever you are, or if you're listening to this and wondering how the hell I got Mark to do a podcast. But, kind of talked about it. I took some podcasting classes at Hood College, and it was always fun. And obviously, podcasts are blowing up now, but it was just one of those things. We always sit and talk at the counter or couch night on end. So, kind of bringing that out to the public and kind of as we've dealt with some stuff through our time, kind of bringing a message out to a greater thing. Introducing Mark. If you don't know him yet, a few things about him: Seattle Mariners and Kansas City Royals scout, 3 stints with Team USA National, 15 and 16U as the pitching coach, state championship head coach at Clear Spring High School, pitching coach at FIU under Danny Price, also founder of the KMS Barnstormers and the barn, which we're in right now, as you see. And so, Mark, you can go ahead and take it away with our why on the podcast. Go ahead and explain a little bit why we're doing this, why we're here, how I got you here.
I kind of chuckle when you say get in front of a camera. It was nothing I've ever thought about or enjoyed, but the why, I think, it's been 3 years since Canon passed, and I kind of, when the boys were in a car accident, obviously I lost two players that night, and Canon passed away the next day. It was a travesty, and it hit the public, it hit our community, and I was the coach for the high school team for I think 17 or 18 years, and I'm big in with kids. I came back here; it was a big thing about kids, and I feel like I've dedicated my life to the youth, and roughly that age between like 12 and 25. So I went recluse. I went away from people in the community. I kind of, I've had guilt with that, and at the same time, I've kind of been behind the scenes, and I've made myself and pushed myself to get through that a little bit. But we talked and we said, there is a message, there is a story, there's a lot that has went on that when a kid calls, I think I can. I think we deal with a lot of people now that are hypocritical. They talk it and they act like they walk it, and they've never even lived it. And I think if you have something and you can offer it, even if it's something like this, and somebody can listen in their car. I'm not a huge podcast guy. I have caught myself in the last year listening to a lot more on my way to work and coming home. But I'm hoping we can get something out of this and share a story with Canon, guys like TJ and Little Canode that day, and maybe touch somebody. And I think that it was more your idea, and I'm just kind of in for the ride. And I hope that somebody listens to it, understands it, and appreciates it. And I hope we can maybe change a life or touch a life.
Yeah, and before we get into the main thing or the questions, obviously the guy behind us, that's Canon. That's him doing his famous pose after closing out the state championship game, and that's kind of became his iconic pose and the Be a Lion thing. So before we get into some questions, I'm gonna ask you. Obviously, we see the Be a Lion with the drawing and the wristbands, all that, and that's kind of the motto that has kind of been formed. If you want to go ahead, inform the people that don't know why it is Be a Lion and that saying.
The lion thing came up. Cannon grew up with this beautiful, basically almost white blonde hair, and sister has it too. So I raised two towheads running around. But I guess he was probably about 14 when he started growing it.
Yeah.
And it was a battle in our house. If you
It was a
knew me,
mess. It was a mess.
cut your hair short. No facial hair on the field, stuff like that. I was old school, and it was just a mess. He didn't comb it. There was days that somebody would send me a picture at school, and it would look like he combed it with an egg beater. And it got to a point where I wanted to cut it. I threatened to cut it. I messed around with him a couple times and held him down like I was going to shave it. But he fought for that, and it was And then one day, his freshman year, I think as a parent and a coach and something like this, you don't appreciate your kid.
Yeah.
And I just never really thought about it, but and I watched him mature, and I didn't want to brag about how that he had become theoretically one of the better players. I started to watch it, and I knew there was something special there. And he hit a ball at North, I think, and he gave out a war hoop at second base. I think it was his first at bat. Hits a double in the gap, gets on second and war hoops, and the blonde hair comes out, and I kind of had a moment there. And I wasn't a coach for a second; I was dad.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit, he's and then I texted him that night because he was with his mom, and I said, "You're fucking looking like you're fucking lying today," and he wrote back, "Ha," and he always was like, "Bro," and it started, and then there's an iconic picture of him with uh, right before in the state championship, the regional, him and another kid hit a home run, and Canon come out like he hit the home run, and the hair was flowing, and he was yelling, and that's basically, he lived like a lion, he acted like a lion. We didn't realize he was a lion, but the foundation and that moment and his hair and stuff, he was a true lion that roamed the earth that I don't think we appreciated till it was gone.
Yeah, and I think you saw that roar at first at North, but I think everybody saw that roar like behind us. That's whenever everybody kind of saw that.
The state championship, yeah, he
And
threw the last pitch and threw the glove and
yeah,
flexed, and and I chuckle at it because I watched the other day there. Every once in a while, you'll see it and remind. Cooper Flagg does it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when he does it, I kind of just sit there, and I appreciate it at the moment and the yell, and it is kind of neat to see.
yeah. And I know you said you sent a text, but I don't know if you know this. Probably one of my favorite, because Canon was on TikTok and all that. We'd always send TikToks. He made a post about all the texts you would send him like before games and stuff. You probably don't know.
I don't know. I
And
never
I'll
get on
probably
TikTok.
I'll show you one
Yeah, I
time.
probably should
But
see
and and it's all the texts. And he's like, sometimes you can't tell if my dad loves me or hates me. But going off that, you texted him. That was just a funny thing I remembered. But getting into some questions. Obviously, after Cannon passed away, you stepped away from coaching as it was just hard on you or family in general. Obviously, your whole life kind of has been coaching now. So asking you kind of how hard was it to step away from coaching, and because that's been your life, and why you decided to really do it.
Well, I started coaching at 22. I was playing independent ball and had an opportunity with a guy down in Miami to do some scouting with the Mariners and get my feet in the door coaching at a school, Ernie Patron, named Florida Christian. So from 22 to 48, I didn't know anything different. There was days, and in a small town, I was asked to coach. I went to college to play basketball first, so I coached the basketball team here and the baseball team for I think 9 or 10 years. That was two sports together, which was crazy. But I've been coaching my whole time. But Cannon was on life support, and I had made that decision that when I had to make a decision, organ donor, and what we were going to do, that it was I wasn't going to put a uniform on again if he couldn't, and I haven't. I won't put probably will never ever put another uniform on again. But it was one of those decisions where I needed to step away. I needed to regroup. I've this town is built around sports. It's a small town America. If you've never been part of small town America sports, man, you miss something in your life. And I had a guy that coached under me, and Brandon Glazier. He played professional baseball. He was a player of mine. I didn't worry about anything with the community. There's other people, and I have a buddy that runs, basically has overseen my travel program, Justin Michael. So I knew those guys were going to take it. I just needed to regroup, and I needed to, and I made a promise to Cannon, and I was going to keep that promise, that I wasn't going to step on that field and do something if he couldn't do it as well. So it was kind of one of those things where a little bit of a private moment, but I've kept true to my promise.
Yeah, and like you said, obviously, it was five of us in that room while he was on life support during that time. And a story that I don't think a lot of people know is, like, obviously we were lucky enough to go ahead and get him committed and finish his journey. And you see the Rutgers post that was able to be put out, which is really nice. But like I've told you, and people in our family know, but Cannon texted me maybe 2 days before that because we were sharing TikToks like we always did, and Rutgers popped up out of all schools, and this at the time when he was debating schools and all that stuff. And then he sent me the whole commitment post, and then for 2 days later that all happened, and then us to be able to make a phone call to Coach Owens from Rutgers and go ahead and commit him and kind of finish his journey. As rough as it was and whatnot, there isn't a better way to go ahead and send him out than to finish that journey.
Well, I think I don't wish any parent or anybody to ever have to go through a day like we went through that day.
Yeah.
But when you're making a decision of your child and their time on earth, I wanted to make sure I had checked all his boxes, because that was kind of the plan of life. So I knew one of his big ordeals was, that was a long year. we went from being Cannon sucked. Cannon sucked at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. He looked like a baby giraffe on ice at times, and I stayed the course with him. I knew he had a special arm, and then I watched his bat translate, and he always had pretty hands. So it was one of those things where, but people still, there's a jealousy factor. There's a factor if you still saw Cannon as an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
You go to Atlanta and you're watching colleges who don't know him, calling us. We walked off the field at Atlanta, and I told him this in the car. I said, "Hey, have a seat, because this phone's going to erupt, and I want you to take a pause, and we're just going to stay in the car." I think we got like 4 calls in like 30 minutes, and he had 4 or 5 calls, while we were sitting at the dinner table, and we wasn't taking any of
You're
them.
right,
I said,
yeah.
we'll take them tonight, but I knew what was about to happen. But I put Coach Owens probably in a bad spot that day. I brought in some of Cannon's old coaches and and I said we're gonna commit to Rutger, because Steve Owens is a special human being. I thought Cannon and him had a special connection. I didn't know exactly Cannon was committing to Rutger, but I knew 99.9%, because he wanted to go someplace where he made a connection with the coach. He made a connection with the school, the assistant coaches, and I think he wanted his own domain.
Yeah.
And I called Coach and I told him, hey, Cannon was in an accident. He's on life support, but we're going to finish the journey that we started. And he was, if there's a better person or coach in the country than Steve Owens, I want to meet the guy, because he's been great. I have a great friendship with him to this day. And, like you said, it's one of those surreal moments that I don't want anybody to have to go through, but I'm glad we did that day.
Yeah, and like I remember like it was yesterday, you asked me, you said, "Do you know where you want to go?" And instantly it
Right.
clicked to that commitment thing. But I'm sure Mark Calvi at South Alabama is going to have something to say to you about the best coach in the country with that.
Yeah, well.
He'll have a good chuckle with that.
Yeah, and I'm sure he will. And Mark and I, Mark Calvi is the most knowledgeable baseball coach I've ever come across.
Yeah, but to go off, obviously, I was lucky enough to go on that visit with you guys, but all the hospitality there at Rutgers, it almost seemed like we've been Canon and you guys kind of known them forever. It just seemed natural on that visit, and all of them were very welcoming. It was a good visit and just felt like home, I think, at the end of the day, and why we were lucky enough to go ahead and commit there for him. Um, Obviously, whenever you got done coaching, whenever you were a coach, you were huge in the community because being out there and everything, running, you were with East Coast Royals, had all that up and running, up and down for travel ball. But whenever you stopped coaching, obviously, you may even be a little bit more involved than what you were into the community before Cannon's passing. After you stopped coaching, how were you able to still stay connected and kind of still be an even our bigger piece in the community?
Um, well, I think I know I still struggle with it to this day, but I battled depression horrifically, and I was trying to find a new niche. Um, I've been a guy that, if Cannon got hit by a ball or Kata got knocked down, I know one time in a soccer game, Kata got her tooth chipped and knocked down. I walked over and like, hand me your tooth and get up. Are you okay? Or if you're not concussed, we're going to play. And with Cannon, get down to first base, blah, blah, blah. Cannon passed away, and 7 days later, I got my ass up and went to work because I was telling Kata to get up and go to school. She went back to college, and you guys were, everybody was kind of struggling. I thought to myself, you can't be somebody you've been your whole life, and now you're going to take a pause because you're going through it. You figure out a way to get through it and how you're going to manage it. And I hope the community saw that. I know my coworkers did. I had people come in. I put that little picture up there, the little girl that was in the. I put my time into my facility, and I didn't stop working with kids privately. And I had 100 kids out in the college ranks and the workforce and the military calling, so I just couldn't pack up, and it was something I'd preached. So, the stay the course thing became big. And I think what I did was what I couldn't do speaking, I hope I showed with resiliency.
Yeah. And even like you would always tell, even with me and Kendra, whenever you took Kendra and I under your wing as kind of a stepdad and everything, because but like I didn't miss a single practice whenever. I think I did for the funeral and whatnot, and the reason why I did that was just because obviously the way you held all of us accountable in the family in that aspect. So I would felt wrong just sitting there, and at the end of the day, you told me one day like Cannon would get up and go to practice, and so that kind of changed my perspective on it and kind of opened up to Like, yeah, it sucks, but you're getting up and doing it because he would if he was still here.
Well, and I think that's been our lesson in our home, and I hope our people translate to that watching us. I know him and his personality. I would have told him the next morning, "Get your ass up." And if it would have been on a different shoe of somebody else, now you make your mark for both.
Yeah.
So and does that put pressure on people? Yeah, but sometimes I think we have a line in here, and you hear people say you're built different. And I think sometimes that if you are built different, then you got a little bit more of a responsibility.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that go ahead and even in sports world you see that would talk that talk, but they're not going to go ahead and do that. So I think then that just shows you kind of the actions speak louder than words with that. I've witnessed, and obviously whenever I moved in and stuff, I always saw it. You kind of valued kids that would work, like the kids that go ahead and work and give in, buy in, all that. It's kind of you're saying, whenever I transferred to Clear Spring my senior year, I would go after school and I'd have weightlifting and basketball practice, so I wouldn't be able to hit until 10 o'clock at night. And still then before you were my stepdad, you opened your facility up to me and house up to me and allowed me to do that. And I've witnessed you taking phone calls. I mean, I've been there with you at 11, 12 at night with college kids that are struggling. They're away from home. They can't get to you. And I sit there, I'm slowing it down while it's on the TV, airplaying it. And I feel like a lot of parents don't see that. And even the parents may not know that their kid is even calling you at that time of the night. So why do you go about that? Even after everything that happened, are you taking phone calls at 11, 12 o'clock at night for kids that are, say, at University of Delaware or wherever they are?
Well, I mean, I think it's a responsibility at the same time. We look at private instruction and we look at, and I tried to say that earlier. Like, I'm in the business of kids. You talked about the facility. Kids hit in here, all hours of the night. Sometimes I got to come down and run them out after 10 or 10:30 because I don't want the neighbors to. But they hit. There's no charge in here.
Yeah.
There's not I think that's some of the things. But this is a place where if you've never been in, I'm sure there's opinions and they can keep them.
Yeah.
But that's basically what it is. It's private. It's what people want to do. But if I've made an impact on a kid's life, that kid needs to call me at 11 o'clock at night. Are there times I look at that phone and I think to myself, what the hell am I, is this? But when you make it and you need to talk to them, I'm thankful for that. I realize that now at 51 years old, that's my responsibility. That's what I was put here to do. We all have some type of a gift, and I guess that's mine. But I'm thankful that a 20-year-old kid is calling me. I had a great call one time. A kid called me right after boot camp. It was late in the evening, and I answered the phone, and he was like, "I made through." And I made through because of the things we did before I got here. Boot camp didn't have shit on what I went through. And at first I was like, man, did we cross the line or did we walk the line? And I hung up. And, those are the kind of calls that I've had, and I don't want parents to think, oh my goodness, but I've had kids call me and like, hey man, I'm quitting and no, let's talk about this.
Right.
Or, my girlfriend and I are, so that's mine. That's sometimes my privacy. That's why sometimes I'm not big on these podcasts because people don't, are you throwing too much of your business out there? But like I said, if we're in it for kids, we're in it for. I would like to think that, and like I said, there's a lot of things parents probably don't know that it's the journey, and I think sometimes that gets overlooked with a coach, especially those. I know when Canon passed, Danny Price was at my house 48 hours later. And I haven't been a player of Danny Price for 30 years.
Yeah.
So, there's the shit people don't see that they have. I'm sure there's a lot of people that pissed on Danny and said shit about Danny, but that's parents, that's fans.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of coach, player, mentor.
Yeah, and that's just sports life.
That's life in sports.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it's everywhere, people have an opinion and, more power to them.
Yeah, and obviously through all that we saw Coach Price was here right away.
48 hours.
We'll get more into Coach Price as we go. But we're going to kind of get into your journey a little bit. Obviously, you played 2 years at HCC. First, you started off with basketball and baseball, but
Couldn't guard anybody.
You couldn't guard
I
anybody.
could score it, but I couldn't guard it.
Yeah. So that you went from HCC, then your dad got the phone call from Cape Cod.
Yeah, how about that? I was running. I was working as a summer playground, which is around here is like a rec thing.
Yeah.
And my dad pulls up. He was home that day. It was back then in 1995 there was no cell phones.
Yeah.
So we had one phone, and I guess dad was home that day. He didn't feel well, and he pulls up to the camp, and I look at him like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "You just got a call from Cape Cod. You got to be there tomorrow morning at 8:30." I'm like, "What?" And I knew at the time Cape Cod, and still is to this day, the most
Yeah.
prestigious amateur league in the country. So I had never flew. I had never been out of probably Maryland, to be honest with you. And I'm on a plane the next morning. Dad drops me off. I fly into Cape. I fly into Boston, get on like a Plymouth something train or a bus, like 3 hours over to the Cape, million stops. Some girl picks me up in a Jeep. She's like, "Hey, I'm the trainer. Game starts at 7. We got there late. Throw a uniform on me. I played back then. It was called the Orleans Cardinals. And 9:30, they call down. They're like, "Get Shives up." And I'm in the game, and I'm thinking, it was a whirlwind day, but you know what? Cape Cod was if you say what was your most, I enjoyed that summer. I tried to keep my head above water. I was in a class of people that were, it was phenomenal. But that was the beginning of the trip.
Yeah, and I know obviously, whenever I got injured, I worked with the Valley League, and that's like a step below Cape Cod. But I mean, the way communities kind of come around those summer leagues, I mean, it'd be a Friday night. You have thousands of fans out there for kids they don't even know of because it's new
And they're
kids
bringing
each year.
chairs out. I remember they would bring chairs out in the middle of the day
Yeah.
because there's no bleat. Everything's set on the hills, and you got a sea breeze, and Todd Helton was on our team. Jonathan Johnson was the 7th pick. Chad Moeller was like a 10-year pick. I could go on and on with names, but you're playing tomorrow's future.
Yeah.
And it like you said, it's just summer baseball, and they got a movie on Cape Cod, but it was one of those surreal moments in time, and I'm very thankful I had the opportunity.
All right. So you go from the Cape, then you go to FIU. The day before you leave for FIU, your father passes, and you kind of have to make a decision. And obviously, in the community, there's some people saying, "Hey, stay back." Some were saying, "Go." But at the end of the day, you hopped in the van with someone from the community. They drove you on down, and Danny Price kind of took you under as a father figure in a way.
Yeah, I woke up that morning. We had rented a van the night before. We packed the van up. We had never been out, so going to do a 21-hour drive to Miami, and we didn't have a car that could make it, so we rented a van. I remember that, and it was packed, ready to roll. Mom and Dad decided to work that morning. I don't know why. I would love to ask either one of them. And I was going to take 2 young boys around here fishing, and then we were going to leave that afternoon, drive so much, stay, make the trek. They were going to make a vacation out of it and drop me off at FIU. On my way to pick the boys up, I found my dad trapped under a roller. He was a construction worker for the county roads, and the roller flipped. And make a long story short, 3 or 4 hours later, they medevacked him out, and he passed away that afternoon. And community rallied around my family. I had a history teacher come up and tell me, get your ass down there, or I'm going to pack your bags for you. And he kind of changed my perspective. People were telling me I was man of the house, and a lot was going on. 6 days later, my basketball coach and a dear friend of our family drove me to FIU. It was funny. They threw me out and took off, so we didn't have a moment. There was no good, and Coach Price showed up at my door about an hour later, and he finished what my dad didn't or couldn't, and to this day, I'm grateful for that. I'm thankful for the community. They took my mom in. They took my sister, who was a senior. Damn, I had some long nights that people never knew about it in Florida, where I'd walk and but I knew my old man would tell me to get my ass down there and finish what we started. So that's exactly what I did. And, I'm thankful I come home with a degree. And I know a lot of people around here probably never thought I'd have a piece of paper that said I had a college degree.
Yeah, and obviously, if you don't know, Coach Price, winningest coach in FIU history, 1,000 wins, I believe.
He's over 1,000
Over
wins.
1,000 wins.
Division
So
One.
legendary coach down there, and even better guy all around. Moving on with you then became a graduate assistant under Danny after you played independent ball,
Mhm.
and Mark Calvey was the pitching coach at the time. You then learned a lot under Calvey and became your niche as a pitching coach for FIU.
Mark Calvey, I don't care what anybody says, Mark Calvey's the best pitching coach in the country right now, even though he hasn't been a pitching coach for, he went to South Carolina and won World Series. Mark Calvey is is special, and he is one of the most humble coaches I've ever been around. And I'm thankful that I had my time under Mark.
Yeah, and while you were down in Miami, you did the stints with Team USA and all that. I just want to ask you, I know we didn't have this down, but I wanted to go ahead and ask you, how surreal was that whenever you became, obviously you always say as Team USA pitching coach, it was the easiest job you had. And
Easiest
what
job ever.
but how surreal was that as a small town kid to go ahead and realize that you're the pitching coach for the national team and you're repping the red, white, and blue in a different country?
Well, I got hired up in Maryland. I wasn't in Florida. I was back here in Maryland coaching high school, and I got a call about Team USA, and I did an NTIS and then did something else and kind of worked my way up, and then I got a call about being a 16U pitching guy, and then the following year we did an inaugural 15U. Surreal is an understatement. One of those things where I didn't really share it back here. Probably, I bet you a lot of people don't even know I did that. Wasn't something I posted in the paper or called anybody about, but I know it took me a full circle. I'm sitting here thinking about it now. It just hit me with a memory. I was sitting against the fence one night. If you've ever been down there, you're up at 7:30. You're on the field from 8 o'clock till all night, and you're in a room. It's a gauntlet run for 2 weeks. Then you fly out, and you're in another country. And I was leaning around back, and what is now my ex-wife and my two kids. I feel this little guy grab me. I was leaning up against the net. It was like 10 o'clock at night. We were playing a game, and there's Canon, and they surprised me. So I got to share that, and they got to see something that kind of allowed us to go full circle. That I know Canon come in and was like, I want to do that. I want to, and I looked at him, and that year we were in the Dominican Republic, and they brought our flag and played the national anthem, and I just had a moment there, like, I hoped that my mom and dad, I could feel them, and I'm like, I'm on foreign soil watching our flag go out, wearing the United States colors. Who in the hell would believe this if I told them?
Right.
So you know what? That's the first time I've ever shared that.
Yeah. And I mean, just a surreal moment. Obviously, you have the jersey and all that downstairs. Just a cool thing. And to go ahead and rep the USA in another country and just see that, that's amazing by itself. Now, you came back, like you just said. You came back from Miami. You decided to, as you wanted to have kids, all that. You came back. What was your reasoning for coming back?
We ran the gauntlet. College baseball is a lot. That last year, the year before that, we had went and we went conference tournament, regional, won the regional, went to Notre Dame, won that, went to Southern California, ran into a guy named Mark Pryor, lost in the super regional. So, I don't think people understand, and I know they don't. Everybody sees college baseball, college basketball, college football. Those guys run the gauntlet. You have to have a really understanding family, wife, team to make it in that business. And I came home. I was taking interviews. Danny's big thing was, for me as a coach, I had to take 3 interviews a year. I came back home one time. I took an interview. I kind of got stagnant, and I said, you know what? I told Danny I was resigning. I was going to take a year off. At the time, I had kicked around. There was a naval job open, and I just took a year off. And we had a child in that process, and I made a decision that I was going to be a dad, and I was going to stay home, and I wanted to be there. I didn't want to be on the road and raise my kid on the road. So I bought some property back here in Maryland, and it was probably the greatest decision I've ever made.
Yeah, and obviously we're on that property now in the barn, which we're in, which was established in 2004. Whenever you came back, you did 2 things, basically. It was you made the barn, kind of made it a second home to people that come here, but you also went ahead and made a travel organization, the KMS Barnstormers. Why did you go ahead whenever you came back and decide you want to go ahead and make an organization like that?
Well, I started a camp. When I first came back, I thought I'd give to the community immediately, and I started a camp, and I called it KMS. My dad's name was Mark Shives. And I'd write that, I had that in my hat, KMS. And I'd look at it, I closed in college, I'd look at that, slap it on my head, and I'd say, let's go to work. And it became kind of a war call over my years, let's go to work. And so I started with a camp, and then I started with some pitching lessons, and then Canon started doing Little League. And man, we're in a rural town, it's small. And Little League wasn't that strong. I remember he had like 4 at bats one night, and I don't think he had a ball that was even in the left-handed hitter's batter's box. And guy called me and asked me about some travel ball, and I was doing 17U. There was a guy in this area, um, and he had called me about his travel days. Back then, travel ball wasn't big yet,
Yeah.
but it was for some, and he was kind of a pioneer at it.
Just not as where it is
No,
nowadays.
you had like there's 2 or 3 teams around here, and we went to Atlanta and we did all that. And kids were signing, and now it's huge.
Yeah.
But I started a team, and Canon was on it, and it was small. And before you know it, I started another one, and I never wanted to get to it to get big, and I've never allowed it to get big. And I've only, I think the most teams we've ever had is 5, and it's not an organization. There's no money. The kid, whatever they have to make to be able to pay for their tournaments and their uniforms, nobody getting paid. I know there's a dirty side to travel ball where the money is about everything, and there's a side that's not. And I wanted to make sure of that, and that's kind of, but it's still rolling, and it's nice to see that my dad's name has been out there for 20, almost, well, now it's been 30 some years since, but it's nice to see that my dad, the emblem. What people don't know is there's a picture, and it's my dad's behind that. An artist did that as a surprise, but it was one of those things. We did it. The barn came about, and like you said earlier in the podcast, here we stand, and this place can be haunting at times. I walk in, there's Canon. A friend put that up not long after he passed, and at first I wasn't sure about it, but I've had some nights where sat there and working out and look up, or walk in here in the morning on Sunday morning at 6:30 to heat the building and take a look at that, and that gives me purpose of let's go to work.
Yeah, and obviously we're about to get into a little bit more with Canon, but whenever you came back and you made the barn and KMS and the Barnstormers and everything, did you ever think it would get to the point where it's at now?
No, and it's funny we say now because to us we look at it, and I think there's been like 300 kids come through here and go to school, and no, and it's funny because you'll get a person come up out of DC, and they'll walk in, they'll be like, "Is this the right place?" And I'll chuckle. You come up that old stone driveway, and it's just a metal pole barn, and and then when they leave, they take it with them, and you'll get a text me like, "Hey man, I'm thankful that we had time." And they call it the barn. I never called it the barn. I had a kid named Christian Benford, and he got drafted and played professionally, and he sent a sign, and on it said the barn. And I guess it was because people would say, "Hey, I'm going to hit at the barn. I'm going." I never called it. There's no sign out front.
Yeah.
But if you ask somebody, it's the barn.
Yeah, and that's kind of the name that's taken off, and that sign's kind of historic in that aspect. But now, obviously, April 11th is Cannon's 19th birthday. Going ahead and obviously celebrating the Lion himself as we sit here and remember him. I want to go ahead, take a moment, and ask if you're listening, whatever platform it's on. Take 3 minutes and 48 seconds out of your day and listen to Cannon's favorite song of "Something in the Orange" by Zach Bryan. But a lot of people, I think, whenever that song comes on, they get really sad and stuff. Obviously, we know Megan starts bawling and crying and everything. But on April 11th, go ahead and blast it, sing it out loud, because there's countless times where Cannon's in my car and we have windows down, just blasting music and singing. So don't think of it as anything as a morning thing. Go ahead, let him put a smile on your face on that day, and just enjoy the 3 minutes of "Something in the Orange" and just remember him for his birthday. And as we sit here, and obviously this podcast, we want to go ahead, as you said, talk about like how we've dealt with stuff, and we're going to bring guests on to talk about how they've dealt with things in their life. And so we sit here, and obviously, you've even dealt with everything that's happened differently than I have compared to like Kendra, Kada, Megan, and everything. So we're sitting here, and whenever you had to go through everything with Canon, kind of, how did you go about that, and how did you deal with all the trauma and grief and all that stuff?
Well, I think, I still deal with it every day. There's grief. If science is phenomenal, and hell, they just brought some wolves back that have been extinct.
Yeah.
But we can't fix grief, and you can't fix, because it's something that's in your soul and in your heart. And I don't think everybody deals with it different, and I think everybody, you have. This is a long week for me. I try not to show it. I don't want my day to damper somebody else's day. I don't want my moments to affect So I do as I've always done, and I kind of push forward. But I at the same time, you have moments, and I call it haunting. I used to love to go hunting, and now I can't sit in a tree stand. So there's a lot of things. How do you get through it? I think some days it's minute by minute, second by second. Some days it's not. PTSD. How do you compare? You hear somebody say, "Oh, they got this or they got that," and I don't give an opinion on it anymore because I don't know what somebody has walked through. I know everything is different. I woke up one morning and found my dad under a roller. I woke up one morning, my mom was 49 my mom was 50, and she had a headache. And 3 hours later, I had to make a decision if we were donating her organs. She had an aneurysm. So I was with my mom when when that occurred. So I've had a call one morning that my best friend drowned. We were roommates in college. We were roommates after college. He and I had 7 years where we run a table of life. So I've been in shit, as people say it, and I wish I could say, that my shit is deeper than somebody else's shit, but I don't think there's any, whatever your trip is, your grief and I get um, there was two boys in the car the night Canon, and I watched their parents, and I watched their battles, and I watched their children, and we got kids, and I watch you guys. And as an adult, watching kids suffer was tough. It still is tough. So I think we get through it on of how we were raised some, and we get through it of perseverance. And I think that's what this podcast is about. And we'll touch on it, and we'll connect to other people, and other people I hope connect to us, and we get strength through each other.
Yeah, and I think you go about that obviously saying some days it's minute by minute and some days it's not. But and that's the truth. And the way I kind of describe it to like whenever my friends I talk to them or whatever, some days you wake up and you're like some days you're like everything's completely fine, but then you think to yourself, you're like, damn, like why am I not sad or why am I not more upset about that? Then the next day will hit you like a brick wall. I mean, you guys saw it when everything happened. I mean, I had damn hives from the top
Yeah.
of my neck down to the bottom of my
And
legs.
that's a stress thing, and it was your stress thing, and I chuckled at it because if I didn't laugh at it, I would be upset about it. There's hell, I don't even drive up the road. I got to drive by the high school every day, and
Yeah,
I have caught myself. I don't look at the high school because so you run from memories, and then you embrace memories, and I'm trying to learn to do both, and it's been 3 years, and are we good at it? No, will we ever be good? I hid mine for 2 years. I didn't let Kada or you or anybody see me at the times upset, but I'd get in the shower and have a breakdown, and then I'd walk out and Megan would be like, mm-hmm. So your spouse can read it, but that doesn't mean I don't want my kids reading it. I don't want the public to see it, But I think that's healing, and
yeah,
and I think that's what we're all trying to do. And I think the best way sometimes to heal is from learn. I had people tell me. I had a guy call me that coached me, and I didn't know he had lost his son. And he told me something, and I was like, I appreciate the call, but I don't want in that fraternity, of that. I want everybody to oh, you lost a kid. No, we're battling something, and we're grieving through something, and we're processing through something, and we all have the same shit. It's just how we look at it. Mine's no different than somebody that might have lost a dog. To them, their grief is their grief, and I don't wish to judge that.
yeah. Yeah, and I think also like now since we've kind of been through it, it's kind of became our normal as bad as it is. But then you do learn to just, hey, whenever moments come up, like at first, kind of the something orange was sad at first, but then you start to just embrace those moments because that's all you can do. But learning to do that is hard because at times, you just don't want to accept it. Or I know personally, like it almost didn't feel real as every time I'd come to the house or whatever, I'd just expect him to roll through the door from his mom's house with dumbass smile on his
No, I
face. And
still do. There's
yeah,
days you still do.
and so just learning to live with that, it's until you really go through something like that, and like you said, whether it's losing a pet or whatever it is, everybody deals with it differently, and you that now realize going through it, like whenever you see somebody out in public, they may look completely fine, but you never know exactly what shit they've been through.
Well, I say that you hear this term now. Everybody says this. Everybody has shit, which they do. But if I had any advice, I have moments. Let's share one. I was at a soccer game right after Canon passed and Cater was
Oh
playing,
yeah.
and at the time I was just looking for a reason, and there was two gentlemen to my right that made the game was ending and Cater kept kicking the ball out of rounds. It was a smart play, and the guy made a comment about. He said her number, and I'm not a guy to speak to anybody.
Yeah. No.
And if this guy would hear this, we were at Penn State Mount Alto. I apologize to you for that moment, but I, I'm glad he didn't respond to me. He just kind of looked. Maybe he saw a man on a ledge.
I mean, he apologized right away because it sounds like you wanted to
I
kick
just
his ass.
wanted him to. I needed to take something out on him, and he didn't deserve that. And I looked at it. Thank God I didn't, and thank God he shut up. And thank God Megan said, "Why don't you go to the car?" But you don't know what somebody's going through. And I think that's where it's just, I know it's tough. I've done it. I've learned to really do it. But sometimes just stepping back and choosing kindness over whatever I know it's not easy, but you have no idea what that person at the gas pump or what that person you just don't know. So sometimes it's tough and I get it, but and like I said, if that guy would ever hear this or somebody, I am apologetic for that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally forgot about that, but I remember that just like it was yesterday. But obviously we got into Canon, and real quick before we get to the end, we're going to do a Mark's Minute where you kind of give like the word of wisdom here. But we'll go ahead. We want to obviously this is mainly about like talking about perseverance, grief, and all that. But at the end of the day, we are sports fans, and we want to just take a few minutes to talk about some sports. Obviously, Florida won the national championship. Good for them. All that. I know you wanted Houston to really win, and I did too, just because I'm a sucker for their coach and kind of the mentality their team has, how they bought into him. So I was a sucker for that. But you,
I was in them damn brackets.
yeah.
I was in a good one, and if Houston won, I think it was it was good money. And then I was in another one if that Houston won. So and I love Calvin Sampson.
Yeah.
I think in today's world of sports, when you can take a 70-year-old man and take 10 guys like he had at Houston, and they go out on that floor and they strap.
Yeah.
And to teach defense, and they are loyal to him. They're up in the mornings lifting, and to watch their progression and his progression over the years, and the devastation they had, and he still allows you to root for the coach, man.
Yeah.
And I think we all were rooting for him.
Yeah, and that's actually, and we were all rooting for him, but I feel like the game that I really kind of bought into him and into his program was whenever they were down so much against Duke. Obviously, they could have folded there. That was on paper. Everybody thought that was the best team in the country, and they were down, I think, down 11 with less than a minute, and you just see all of them. It seemed like they kicked to another gear, and I shared the stat with you, which I think is insane. Their whole team runs like an average 5:19 mile.
And that's 6'10". That's big boys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a picture of them in the weight room. You can go on the internet, and they're just 8-packs jacked, and you can just tell they're bought in. And so for me, kind of this place getting bought in and stuff, that's kind of why I really liked Houston and all that. But obviously, Florida got hot at the right time, and they were a great team. And the Final Four, like we said, everybody hates it kind of because NIL is kind of getting rid of the Cinderellas in a way. But those were the three. You had the two Final Four games, national championship, all three great basketball, and you couldn't have asked for anything better.
No, I mean, you got what you paid for. How the hell Vegas knew before that game that it was a 1.5 point spread and Houston was the underdog? That blows my mind. But I think we've watched basketball over the years. When you sat there in the final game, as much as I can't stand the portal and all the shit going on in the NCAA, it was refreshing to see two really good teams go at it, come from behind, show perseverance, show everything that a young kid. I can remember sitting at home when I was 12 and my mom be yelling, "Is the game over?" And I'm like, I need to watch one shining moment, I need it,
Yeah.
So I thought it was kudos to NCAA on the tournament, and kudos to both of those coaches to put together a product that I think that a young kid can be like, I want to do that.
Right.
And isn't that what it's about in the end when you hand the torch to the next kid, and and I think they did that, and congratulations to Florida.
Yeah, congrats to them, and obviously just stuff like this is only going to help like both Florida and Houston's program as they see just how bought in everybody is with that, because Florida went through against the Texas Tech where they thought they were going to be out. So they had perseverance of their own. But getting into, obviously, we had opening day, all that, which is surprising because I've seen with we saw yesterday it was the Guardians and somebody else had a home
The White
opener,
Sox,
White Sox, and it felt like it was so late
and
for a
you
home
know
opener.
their ass was cold.
Yeah,
You
oh
know
yeah.
you gotta really like baseball to sit in Chicago and hell and watch the White Sox right now to begin
Well,
with.
the Pirates, they if you had an MLB account, I told you this yesterday, I think, if you had an MLB account, they gave you a ticket for another game of your choosing that year just because it was so cold at.
Miserable.
Yeah, so that was kudos to the Pirates for doing that for those people. But now we're gonna kind of move into your I call it Mark's minute, but kind of your minute of wisdom and whatever you want to say for the day on the podcast. So you can go ahead and take it away.
Mark's minute kind of makes me chuckle. I thought about a couple things and to connect to sports, but I think with this being the first one, and we speaking of Canon and Friday being his birthday, I think we sometimes don't reflect and look back to a pause. And I think I get to do it now because I don't have nothing else that's going on with Canon in his life. But I don't think sometimes we cherish the journey and we don't sit and reflect. I would come home from a travel tournament and I'd be exhausted, or I would look over, and now some of probably my favorite picture that I have of Cannon is when he was about 10 years old and we played a travel tournament and I'm coming home and it's just he and I in a car and he's balled up in the back seat and he's asleep. As I'm older now, those are the things that I think if you're a parent listening to this, just take a pause. Accept the good, accept the bad. If you're in a car and you're riding home and your kid's in the back seat and you're worrying about what's for dinner or what you got to do Monday morning to get the kids ready for school, put it on the back burner and take a 2-minute drive with that kid in the car and just be thankful that you're protecting that kid and that there's a ride there of silence, but the silence speaks volumes. And if I could have that ride again, man, I would take it tomorrow. So just the thought of it in the minute and something I thought I could share.
Yeah, and for the crazy parents out there, maybe go ahead and post something to your kids like that instead of posting that little Timmy went 3 for 3 in his little league game.
Proud. What is it? What is it? Proud dad moments.
Yeah,
Proud. Not.
proud dad. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously going ahead and cherishing that, and like you going off what you just said for myself, you know, a lot of my friends see it now and they've asked me, but ever since everything kind of happened, like, I thought the end of the world at one point was whenever I went to back-to-back surgeries at that point. But then you go through something like that, and you just cherish every moment you have. Whenever we come up and visit, obviously, anytime I would come up, we always have fun and whatever. But you just cherish those moments just a little bit more now, and so something like that just kind of opens your eyes and just kind of sees the beauty in the relationships in life and those around you, and just like that, they can be gone. So I think you hit it right on the nail. And obviously, we were talking about with the transfer portal, everything. I'm sure we're going to get into that in later episodes because I know you have a lot to say about that, and so does the whole world with everything going on. But other than that, kind of wrapping up this first episode of Lions Life, obviously, Canon's birthday, like we said, on Friday. So happy birthday to him. Like I said, go ahead, blast something orange. And I know that if you want to go ahead and mention, because we do the foundation, the Be a Lion Foundation, before we go, if you want to go ahead, because it'll probably be on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, the Instagram, Facebook, and stuff. If you want to go ahead, just give if people don't know about it, whoever's listening, just what the foundation's about and its reasoning for it.
Well, right after he passed away, we had an outpouring of donations and people just to the family. And I didn't, we decided to take that and the gifts that people sent us or trying to give us, offering us help. We said that we put it into a foundation. And the foundation is kind of a widespread. That's why we called it a foundation and not just a scholarship. Every year we give 2 kids scholarships. We've gave some additional to behind the scenes to people that we knew needed some stuff. The foundation is we have something that we're aiming towards, and maybe we'll get to announce that on here one day of what our biggest and our vision is. We do everything kind of behind the scenes because that's can't preach humble and be private, and then you're trying to pump everything out.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of things for families at Christmas in need, and fed places, made sure kids had gifts and things, and we've clothed people. I don't want to get too much into it in the sense of what, like, I don't want to think we're bragging of it. It's if somebody needs something and we know that, we try to get in there and do that. And I think the best gift we can do is show the way to people that are in need, so they know there are people out there that are doing things and helping people and choosing kind and being with mankind. That and hopefully one day they get the same opportunity, and they do the same thing, and they do it with Canon's way, and they remember that even though his time is not here, it is still handing out to the next group.
Yeah, and like I said, that you can find that on Instagram, Facebook, Be a Lion Foundation. You'll see Cannon's big roar of a picture, that's a profile picture, and all that. So obviously, right now as we're recording this, it's not his birthday, but happy birthday to him as this goes out. And as we wrap things up, do you have any final remarks?
Uh, I don't think. I think, you know what? Every year we try to do something on Cannon's birthday. So when you see this podcast and, touch somebody, say hello. There's nothing wrong with a hello or how are you doing or a good morning or those things, or just a smile, because I think just sometimes those are the things that remind you of Cannon. So let's I didn't want to get upset this week, but let's just try to do that.
Yeah. And one thing I always say is, wake up and go live that lion's life and be a lion. But other than that, thank you very much for listening. This is only the first episode, so stay tuned for updates. We'll be posted on social media. I know we've talked about a possible giveaway and stuff.
Yep, we're gonna do
So
that.
stay tuned on all social media. It should be, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see it on the screen below. But if not, Be a Lion Foundation on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, again, happy birthday to Cannon, and live your life like a lion and be a lion.